What's up guys, I'm Ben from AuthenTech, and today we're comparing the new DJI Osmo Action versus GoPro Hero 7 Black. Now there's a ton to cover, and of course we're not going to be able to cover everything in this video, but if you stick around, I'll probably be doing a lot more deep dives and comparisons coming soon. Neither company sent me a camera. I bought it with my own hard-earned cash, so keep that in mind. Osmo Action, $350. GoPro Hero 7 Black, same price, $350. Now they recently updated this since it was originally $400, but I have an inkling that they wanted to stay competitive to the competition. Plus that GoPro 8 hopefully isn't too far away, which might change everything. But at least for today, same price, level playing field. Let's compare some pixels to pixels and just the key features. Which one has the better quality overall? Just about everyone on YouTube has already compared all the main fancy features, which I'm glad to deep dive into another video if you guys want. But today, I want to focus mostly on the quality of the photos and the videos of what these cameras can shoot. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's mostly all about. 4K 30 on each, HDR on the Osmo Action. First, it's awesome that the Osmo Action can turn HDR on when recording video, but as a huge bummer, you can't turn on electronic image stabilization in this mode, and that's at any resolution or frame rate. Plus, you can't record 4K 60 in HDR either, it's sort of lame, and you can see just how shaky the Osmo is without stabilization turned on. In terms of the dynamic range, this is a pretty contrasty scene with bright skies and uber dark shadows in the trees, and funny enough, the GoPro seems to have better details maintained, like on the bark of the tree. Even when we point up at the leaves, the blue skies look much more vibrant and clear on the GoPro over the Osmo's HDR video. If we zoom way in, 400% on both, and peek at a few pixels, I've got to give it to the GoPro for the better looking clarity. Look at the bark and the leaves in the background. We can see at least a little bit of detail on the GoPro, while the Osmo looks pretty mushy and blocky pixels. When I point the camera backwards and analyze my skin tones, the GoPro does this horrible mushy skin smoothing effect on my flesh. It looks a little off or weird. However, on the Osmo Action, my skin is over red and a little too much contrast and crushed blacks, not super crystal clear with little blotchy spots. The somewhat flatter color profile on the GoPro might look a tad better, but I'm not sure. What do you guys think? And this is 4K 30 FPS on both again, but no HDR turned on the Osmo Action. That means we can turn on that rock steady stabilization. A few things I notice here. First, the dark shadows and contrast on the Osmo Action is way too harsh for my taste. I'm all about a vibrant and straight out of camera contrast look, but this is a bit too much for me, at least in this shot. How did the colors and dynamic range now look with HDR turned off on the Osmo? Honestly, I like the colors and contrast much better with HDR turned on for the Osmo Action, but without stabilization turned on, it's almost useless for me in any moving action shot. And this is an action camera after all. It also looks like the field of view is wider on the GoPro over the Osmo, and that's a good thing. 4K 30, this is setting a base standard of what stabilization turned off on both cameras look like. Here's the field of view that you can expect, and here's the sort of stability that you can expect. Pretty crazy how much shake and wobble there is on these action cameras when there's no stabilization turned on. When we turn on the stabilization on both, I notice the Osmo has this horribly laggy delay on the display from what happens in real life to what shows on the screen. Just look at this small example here. I made sure all firmwares were updated, and I'm not sure if this is a weak processing chip or software issue. Thankfully, it doesn't ruin the recorded shot, but that delay is sort of annoying and weird to have. Don't get me wrong, the GoPro is not without fault. In just this video test, it froze on me at least 3 separate times. It's super unacceptable to me. I even asked you guys on my Instagram if you have freezing and glitching issues on your GoPro, and it looks like I'm not alone. This just seems pretty unbelievable. 4K 30 with stabilization turned on both. Now how does the difference look? In this simple walking test, the both are producing some nice smooth results. When I pick up the pace and jog a little bit, this is finally an area where it seems the Osmo Action is killing the GoPro with that rock steady stabilization. I've done a lot of GoPro 7 stabilization comparisons in the past, and it always comes out on top. But it looks like there might finally be a new king in town with that EIS tech. Just look at the background and the GoPro. It's not crazy awful or anything, but notice how the background landscape is wobbling around a bit, whereas in the Osmo is keeping a sweet and level flat horizon without much wiggle. In terms of field of view, the GoPro is slightly wider angle, which is nice, and the Osmo crops in just a little bit more. I tried one of those fun wiggle and shake the cameras excessively tests, and it's kind of interesting to see the third person perspective laid on top of the footage. And honestly, they both do an impressive job of stabilizing out a lot of the shake. But I've got to give it to the Osmo for still looking a bit smoother overall here. When I jumped onto the rover and looking at the results, the Osmo honestly doesn't look bad by any means in terms of quality, sharpness, white balance, and saturation, and its stabilization is really good too. But it's also interesting to think about GoPro. They've been around for such a long time, and even though they were priced a little bit too high for a while, if you can now pick up a GoPro 7 at the exact same price, well, which one do you go with? Some people will have brand loyalty till death, like hardcore GoPro or DJI, one over the other, no matter what. And I personally don't lean that way. I'd say whichever camera has the most bang for your buck is the one to purchase. Both recording 4K 60 with both stabilizations turned on. Now when we switch to 4K 60 EIS on both, we can notice just how much more the Osmo crops in on frame. As for image quality, clarity, and stabilization, well, they're both doing a nice job again, even as I'm rattling and shaking all around on the cycle board. As for that crop in, I understand in certain situations this would be a huge bummer for the Osmo, but at least in this little test, I found it to still be wide enough, though GoPro is still a win for me with the punchier colors and wider field of view, all while keeping a smooth, stable shot. 4K 30 Super View turned on the GoPro. Now this one is super interesting. Look at just how much wider the GoPro is over the Osmo, and EIS is still turned on both. Look at those vibrant blue skies, details in the green grass and the leaves, even the brown mulch. Everything on the GoPro side looks so much more vibrant and pops off the screen, making it look like a beautiful sunny day. On the Osmo side, it's so washed out, almost looks overcast or overexposed and blown out. 4K 30 stabilization turned on both. This is a windy audio test. How does the audio sound? This is a windy audio test. How does the audio sound? This is the new DJI Osmo Action, and this is the GoPro Hero 7 Black. How does the audio sound and compare? Let's live AuthenTech. Let's live AuthenTech. In my windy audio test, man, that Osmo sounded way too quiet with no editing applied to either. Now, even though they both can hear that wind noise, the GoPro wins it again for me. I'm currently looking into third-party mic adapters to see what would work with the Osmo. Stay tuned for maybe a whole video on that coming soon. And this is an indoor audio test, a little bit more quiet and controlled in here. Here's the Osmo Action audio, and this is audio on the GoPro Hero 7 Black. Audio test 1, 2, 3, 4. Audio test 1, 2, 3, 4. In that indoor test, well, the Osmo got a bit louder and better sounding. However, the GoPro is still louder and a bit fuller sound. Remember, both these cameras have built-in waterproofing, thus their mics are usually lacking in good quality. It's a trade-off. I jumped inside for a medium to lowish light test, and it looks like the saturation and colors on the GoPro are a little too saturated here. The Osmo looks to have possibly better colors, though it's pretty grainy and noisy. Then again, GoPro is pretty noisy as well, not as bad, but both of these cameras have such small sensors, neither are awesome in low lights. Then, interestingly, after turning on the HDR for the Osmo, even though it's still pretty grainy, the bright overexposed windows and dark wood walls, they're much better exposed and maintain better details over the GoPro. Very cool. I shot 2 more quick super low light video tests, this one at 4K 30, and the Osmo looks much warmer in color tones, while that LED lamp is clean white, so it looks like GoPro has a little bit more accurate colors here. Both have pretty rough noise and grain going on. In 4K 60, pretty much the same here, grainy, pixelated, too warm on the Osmo, and the GoPro just looks mushy, though at least we can see a bit more detail in the shadows over the Osmo. I snapped a few photos in the bright sunlight and contrasty scenes. I don't think we can shoot HDR photos on the Osmo, which is sorta strange as it can shoot HDR video, but maybe that's coming in a software update. Seems unfortunate to me. Anyway, we can clearly see that it's a needed feature as the HDR photos on the GoPro just pop off the screen and look much more vibrant. The Osmo still takes some nice standard photos with good sharpness and clarity, but the dynamic range just looks a little limited without HDR. On a GoPro negative side, well, we can see with that HDR can bring some possible ghosting or motion blur, as these tests were all handheld and probably had a little shake during the exposure. In a couple low light photos, both look a little rough, but then again, the Osmo looks a tad sharper in clarity and details, which is nice. Both cams can shoot up to 240 FPS, 1080p. The colors and clarity look better on the GoPro. The GoPro looks to have some pretty gnarly chroma subsampling issue in those finer details of the bark shooting out. The Osmo Action looks a bit pixelated and blocky. A little sad that neither can shoot 480 FPS yet, hopefully next model. One key feature to note here in the high frames, when both cams record 240 FPS, neither can turn on the stabilization. However, another point of win to the GoPro, when we step down to 120 FPS at 1080p, well, we can turn back on that standard stabilization. As for the Osmo Action, well, unfortunately, even at the 120 FPS 1080p, the Rocksteady is unavailable. Kinda another bummer, as we can see in the side-by-sides, the Osmo is shaky even in the slow-mo, while GoPro looks smooth. A few thoughts in all these tests. Well, I have to congratulate DJI for entering into this action camera market, and we all need to be thankful as competition is healthy and it'll help others to continue to innovate and push the envelope, which is good for all consumers. The front-facing screen on the Osmo was really great in concept, but has one massive flaw, which seriously makes me almost never use it, and that's because you can't preview your shot on both screens at the same time. Lame. And if you're mid-recording and you want to switch from one display to the other, well, then you need to stop the video recording. So again, I love the idea of having a front-facing screen to frame up that selfie shot, but without it being touchscreen up front and you can only view one screen at a time, well, it sort of breaks the feature for me. I thought I would recommend the Osmo for overall good balance, quality, and features for a cheaper price tag, but now that you can snag a GoPro 7 for the exact same price of $350, well, I'm not sure I would lean that way anymore. Also keep in mind the GoPro 7 is about 8 months old, which means hopefully the new GoPro 8 will be announced or released soon, and hopefully that model will bring some fresh new features and quality improvements. Oh, and last up, if you really want some fresh and unique action camera shots, make sure you check out my Insta360 videos. Those guys are killing it, and I definitely think DJI and GoPro Fusion, they're working on an Insta360 camera killer. I'm excited to see what they come out with soon. Thank you guys for watching. Leave me your thoughts and questions down in the comments. I'll see you next time.